Hi, welcome back to the Way Everlasting YouTube channel. I'm Robert. It's great to be with you guys this week. I have an exciting message to share with you and a cool story to tell. And just pray that you had a great Berdaha for your Passover, for you and your family and loved ones. Really excited about this week. We're going to talk about a subject that's been near and dear to my heart for a very long time. And it's a key to, I think, understanding, unlocking the end time, if you will. And that is the subject that everyone loves to talk about, the rapture. I mean, how can you know if you're at the end if you don't know about the rapture? So the rapture is probably where most conversations about the end start. If you teach on the end times, you're going to teach on the rapture. Vice versa, if you teach about the rapture, you have to teach about the end times to even explain the rapture. So I've always been fascinated by this subject. Even when I was a Christian, it's one of those subjects that probably has the most controversy around. And what I mean by that is there is pre-trib rapture believers, there's mid-trib rapture believers, and there are end of the tribulation, second coming, and the rapture is the same thing believers. Although I don't know if that's a rapture belief or not. But so that's the three beliefs as far as the rapture: pre-trib, mid-trib, at the end of the at the end of the tribulation, before the second coming. And I personally have always been, if there's a rapture, and I was this way in Christianity. If there's a rapture, it's most likely going to be mid-trib, and we're going to go through something before the rapture occurs. And I base that on a lot of scriptures that I just could never reconcile. He that endures to the end would be saved is a big one. And others I'll share with you today that to offer a different thought, right? And the goal here is that if you don't understand this idea of a rapture and what all it encompasses, understanding the end time, it is going to cloud your understanding of the end time. Okay. And I'll explain it as we go. So really just jumping right into 1 Thessalonians 5 verse 3. Very, very fitting for today. 1 Thessalonians 5 verse 3. You can follow along in Blue Letter Bible. Just go to blueletterbible.org, and then you can just pick your favorite verse and rock and roll with me. So 1 Thessalonians 5 verse 3, for when they are saying peace and safety, then sudden destruction will come on them like birth pains on a pregnant woman, and they will in no way escape. I'm instantly reminded by my wife, when you say they, who is they? Because I'll be having a conversation with her and she'll just get mad at me because I won't give a context for who I'm talking about or what I'm talking about. And that's the way it is sometimes when you read the scripture, right? You're reading verse 3 and you're saying they are saying, and they will in no way escape. So who's the they in this verse? And really, in order to understand end times, whether this is the end, okay, that's the question that some may be asking. We need to identify key phrases. For example, when reading 1 Thessalonians 5:3, the they is not defined. You have to read additional scriptures to get context. So we need to read verses 1 and 2 before verse 3 so that we understand the context and what it means. So if we do that, we can go to verse 1. But concerning the times and the seasons, where did we hear that? Well, first of all, let me start by saying because of the way that this verse starts, if you didn't watch the last episode or teaching, go back and watch the teaching before this, okay, about Passover, because it will connect the two and it will make a lot more sense if you have that foundation. For everyone else, concerning the times and the seasons, that's obviously the Moed of Yahweh. We defined that before. You have no need that anything be written to you. Okay, so now we have some context. For you yourselves know well that the day of Yahweh comes like a thief in the night. Okay, for when they are saying peace and safety, then sudden destruction will come on them. So who's the they? It hasn't been defined yet. I find it really, really interesting. It just hasn't been defined yet. Now, we're going to go and look at chapter 4 to see if we can get some more context. But just keep that in mind. But when they say peace and safety, then sudden destruction. And I've talked about this, and we're going to get into this more. The timing of this is perfect because of the war in Iran. Everybody's seeing what Trump is doing and saying, you know, he's settled 7, 8 wars and brought peace to Israel. This week, Israel and Lebanon have a ceasefire in place. Iran has a ceasefire in place. Before that, you know, there's a whole list of peace scenarios that he's been a part of to help broker and bring about peace. And a lot of you may think, okay, well, he's the Antichrist or the anti-Messiah. Okay. The problem with all this is that you're trying to piece this together from what's called a dispensational view. Whether you realize it or not, there is a dispensation, it's what's called a dispensational view that has trained you in Christianity, in your belief system, to think about all of these events and all of this context in a certain way, instead of just the way that the scripture unfolded them. Concerning the times and the seasons, brothers, he's writing to Hebrews. They know what the times and the seasons are. They know that that's the Moed of Yahweh, the prophetic appointments with mankind. You don't have a need that anyone write to you. Why? Because it's already written in the Torah. The Moed are laid out, the 7 Moed of Yahweh, the Passover, the Passah, which we just celebrated on April 3rd or 5th, I think. No, it's 3rd. Double check that. We just celebrated on April 3rd. We know that Passah is the event that he's referring to. Why? You yourselves know well that the day of Yahweh comes like a thief in the night. Well, we'll talk about this more, but he's writing to Hebrew brothers. Like, so when he says that you know the times and the seasons, it's not it's not a song, right? It's a Hebrew lifestyle. They know the Moed of Yahweh. They're not ignorant of that. They have the law of Moses, the Torah, in their hearts. They know it inside and out. But ask yourself a few questions here. What are the times and seasons? If you're reading this as a Christian or as a believer, whether a Hebrew believer, a Christian believer, whatever, right? If you're reading this and you don't know what the times and seasons are you going to be able to understand this verse? What's the day of Yahweh? If you only understand the day of Yahweh as the day of wrath or the pouring out of Yahweh's wrath, your view of the day of Yahweh may be skewed. Is that the rapture? Or as Alan Horvath called it, the net chetef? Why does Shaul teach the day of Yahweh comes as a thief in the night? I mean, it's kind of a wild statement. Doesn't the thief in the night give credence to a disappearance of Christians all over the world, believers, in a rapture event? Isn't that what that's referring to when all the remaining verses speak of us being of the light or of the day? Why did he phrase it that way? What did Shaul say about the timing concerning the times and the seasons? Brothers, you have no need that anything be written to you. So if you were taught there is a rapture, then you're not looking for the day of Yahweh. If you're taught that the day of Yahweh is the pouring out of Yahweh's wrath, you don't understand what the day of Yahweh is or is supposed to be. You're looking for basically a disappearance act of Christians all over the world. But is that what Scripture teaches? And that's the only question we seek to ask on this channel. It's the only question that matters. Is that what Scripture teaches? Because if I go off and teach something that is not in the Scripture, defined by the Scripture, or interpreted by the Scripture, I don't need to be teaching. And we've warned over and over again, you cannot and should not build a doctrine out of a single verse. But that's exactly what Christian teachers have done with the rapture. And I've been kind of dancing around this in some of the teachings, but today the Father really, really solidified some things that I didn't fully understand, but now I do. And studying this out even more. And this is only the tip of the iceberg. But I've been talking about the rapture in funny ways, as you guys probably picked up, that it doesn't quite fit the way I think it should fit in the scriptures, the way it's taught. So 1 Thessalonians 4:16 and 17 says, again, we're asking that question, what does the scripture teach? What does the scripture teach? So we have to weigh that question against scripture, only scripture. 1 Thessalonians 4:16 and 17, let's go look at that. Shaul writes, for Yahweh himself will descend from the heavens with a shout, with the voice of the chief angel, and with Elohim's shofar. The dead in Messiah will rise first. Then we who are alive, who are left, will be caught up together with them in the clouds to meet the Adon in the air. So we will be with the Adon forever. Now, here is the famous word that is used to describe the rapture, because the word rapture is not found in scripture anywhere. It's harpazo in the Greek. And an entire doctrine has been formed out of this shall be caught up, harpazo, G726. Caught up, by force, caught away, catcheth away, pluck, catcheth, pulling. To seize, carry off by force, to seize on, claim for one's self eagerly, to snatch out or away. You guys get the picture. But I have a simple question for you. Do you guys see anywhere in those words that are defining this Greek word harpazo as disappearing? Caught up by force, caught away, catch away, pluck, catcheth, pulling, to seize, carry off by force, to seize on, claim one eagerly, to snatch out or away. Well, I mean, if I just use some common sense and I pull something out really fast, I'm still going to see it. It's not going to disappear. I ain't that quick. I mean, I think we've all experienced this. We're hanging out with somebody, and an old lover, is trying to break up the hanging out, and they grab hold of us and pull us away. Like, that's you're not disappearing. You're not Spider-Man or some superhero that you're just all of a sudden can teleport. Like, you can still see what's happening. So why have they used the language of disappearing? Okay, well, let's look at this a little bit closer. 1 Corinthians chapter 15, verse 51 and 52. I mean, why can't caught up just mean taken out in the same way that you came down or he came down? 1 Corinthians chapter 15, verse 51. I mean, can we use scripture to define caught up? I do. Let's see if we can. 1 Corinthians 15, 51. Behold, I tell you a mystery. We will not all sleep, but we will all be changed. In a moment, in the twinkling of an eye, at the last shofar, for the shofar will sound and the dead will be raised incorruptible, and we will be changed. So Paul wrote 1 Thessalonians and he wrote 1 Corinthians. Don't both of these scriptures sound very, very familiar? Both of them reference the last trumpet. Both of them reference that the dead will be raised. Both of them reference a raising of believers, aka caught up, harpazo. But what if I said to you that the rapture doctrine, the belief, the rapture doctrine was not taught before the 1800s? Seriously, think about this. Would that give you pause, or would you want to learn more? Because here's the facts. Before the 1830s, no church father, no medieval theologian, no reformer, no early Protestant, no Jewish apocalyptic text, no early Christian writing ever taught a pre-tribulation rapture or a two-stage coming of Christ. Well, Robert, you must be mistaken. Am I? Let's dig further. So let's play a game. You're not going to know the answer, but play along. What's the earliest record of the teaching of the rapture? Now, and I really want you to use critical thinking here and not get offended at what I'm saying. We actually have authentic, written, preserved teachings from the earliest followers of Messiah that go back much earlier than most people realize, in some cases within one generation of the original apostles. And I'm using some words to help you guys just understand. And in a few cases, possibly from people who personally knew those apostles. The earliest non-biblical Christian writings date back to AD 50 through AD 150. Now think about that. We have writings from second-gen believers just 20 years after Messiah's crucifixion. But the rapture doctrine, I'm not saying end-time teaching, the rapture doctrine was not taught before the 1800s. 1770 years before the rapture doctrine is even taught. I mean, here it is on the screen. You can see that these writings date back the Diashe, the First Clement, Ignatius, Polycarp, Barnabas, Hermas. There's a really famous Christian teacher on YouTube now. I forgot his name, but everybody has him on there. He's on all the talk shows. He's on all the podcasts. He goes through all these guys all the time, right? 8050 to 8150. Every one of these are authentic writings that we can go and look at the text that they've been preserved in Hebrew, and we can read them and see. Diadesh, a contemporary with Paul. First Clement, he knew Peter and Paul. Ignatius, John the Apostle. Polycarp, a disciple of John. Barnabas, an early Jewish Christian teacher. Hermas, popular in John's Revelation, in the era of John's Revelation, which I think was like 80-70, if I'm not mistaken. But there's not a single writing about the rapture before 1800, yet I can go back to 8050. Don't you think that these guys were teaching about the words of Yeshua, about the end? Paul over and over exhorted the church about the end time, to be ready, to always be praying for the peace of Israel, on and on and on. And there's not a single written statement about the rapture before 1800, guys. We can even go earlier than that, where we have early Messianic hymns in the AD 40s. We have the Resurrection Creed, the Apostles' Creed, 80s, 30s, and 40s. And we have other eyewitness accounts that are written down in Luke, from Luke's account. We can go earlier than that. Papias, Hegesippus, a Jewish Christian historian, disciples of John, the Gospel of the Hebrews used by early Jewish believers, the Gospel of the Nazarenes, the Gospel of the Ebionites. Yet not one references the rapture. This isn't a play on words. It's just, it's not taught. And I'm not endorsing any writings outside of the original Hebrew scriptures, and you guys know that. I've made that plain in all our teachings. You have to be very, very careful of the Gnostic Gospels and crap like that. You shouldn't be studying that. You should stop listening and searching YouTube and trying to find all these different teachers to try to teach you. Just get in the Word and let the Father teach you. I don't go and study YouTube teachers for 2 weeks or a week when I'm separated from y'all. I study in the Word, taking notes, praying about it, studying. And thankfully, I have a wonderful wife that the Father speaks to, and she speaks to me. And it's just that much more powerful. Like, you only need a few spiritual fathers, if you will, in your life. You don't need to go. Yes, there was a time where I had to go learn the information. But then I matured enough where I could go and study it out myself. Now, I want you to think about how important the rapture is to the core belief of a Christian today. I remember what it meant to me and how I used it to witness to people. And what I mean by this is that, does it make sense if you are going to teach on the end times? And that's the difference. Every one of these writings taught on the end times. But you did not teach on the rapture. Like, think about that. Can you imagine the minister, the preacher sitting up today talking about the end times and not discussing the rapture? But that's exactly what we see from the early followers. I thought that was strange. I said, now I want you to imagine that out of the many sources we shared of the theologically agreed upon second generation followers of Messiah, don't you think it odd that none of them wrote about the rapture? And seriously stop and think about this. None of the considered church fathers taught on it either. But they all wrote extensively and taught extensively on the end times. None of the early church fathers taught on the rapture between AD 150 and 400. Justin Martyr, Irenaeus, Tertullian, Hippolytus, Cyprian, Augustine, none of the early medieval church taught on the rapture between AD 400 and AD 1500. Jerome, Aquinas, none of them. No rapture doctrine, no two-stage coming, no secret removal of the church. And I know, like most of you, you've never heard of these names before. I get it. So here are some names that you should recognize if you've been in Christianity for a long period of time. How about the Reformation from AD 1500 to 1700? You've heard of the Reformers, Martin Luther, Calvinism, Calvinism, Zwingli, Tyndale, the Tyndale Bible, Wesley, John Wesley. They all wrote about the end times, but none of them taught a rapture doctrine. They believed one resurrection. They believed in one return of Messiah. They believed in one judgment. They believed that it would occur at the last day. This is exactly as Yeshua taught. They all taught extensively on the resurrection at Messiah's return, one visible coming, not some disappearing event. Judgment of the wicked, endurance through tribulation, and the wicked removed first. We're going to look at that. But no, they didn't teach a two-stage coming, and they did not preach on a pre-tribulation escape. And that means if you're tracking with me right now, you should by now be very interested in the rapture doctrine and its origins and where it started to be taught. And it should give you great pause that the doctrine wasn't taught before the 1800s. So where did the rapture start? Well, this teaching, ladies and gentlemen, Havarim, started in 1830. In 1830, Margaret MacDonald, a 15-year-old teenager, a 15-year-old teenage girl in Scotland, a member of a charismatic revival movement called the Irvingite movement, had a prophetic and dramatic vision while she lay sick and earnestly praying about the end times during this revival movement, where she described a two-stage coming of Christ, where the vision showed her that true believers would be taken before the tribulation. A 15-year-old teenage girl had a vision during one of the most controversial revival movements of the time. But wait, there's more. According to historical accounts, Margaret was praying intensely about the last days while being ill. She believed the world was entering a time of great deception. She suddenly felt overwhelmed by what she described as the Spirit of God. She began speaking out a long prophetic message where her family just happened to be there and local believers wrote it down. copies were circulated among the movement believers. And here's the thing. It wasn't just a vision of the rapture. It was made into an entire doctrine from the key elements of her vision spread by famous preachers of the time. And let's see if the vision and these elements survived the test of time to where we still follow them today. Let's see if you can recognize these themes, because I know I did. It speaks of a coming time of great deception, a falling away, deception through false signs, false miracles, false Christs, false spiritual manifestations. It speaks of a time, a separation between true and false believers, those who were spiritually ready, those who were not. It speaks of a two-stage coming of Christ, a first stage secret coming of Christ for the ready, true believers, a later visible coming of Christ in judgment. This is the first documented instance of a two-phase return of Christ, Messiah. Believers being caught up before the worst of the tribulation. Believers being taken, caught up, and removed before the fiery trial that would come upon the world. The tribulation as a purifying fire, a test, a refining fire, a separation of true and false believers. Folks, this is her vision. A spirit, the Spirit revealing new truth. New truth. For the last days, the Spirit was giving new revelation about the end times. And that's what the whole movement was about. So who are the Irvingite movement, and how did this prophetic message spread like wildfire into the mainstream church? Well, like all deceptive movements, a single figure was selected to carry the vision, and his name is Edward Irving. In Scotland and England, centered around the preaching of what became, ready for this, the Catholic Apostolic Church. That's after they were expelled because of the movement from the church, and they became the Catholic Apostolic Church. So what did this movement teach? What did Irving teach? Restoration of the apostles. They believed God was restoring the 12 apostles in the last days. They literally appointed new apostles. Prophecy was central to what they believed, so many words from the Spirit were spoken publicly, especially about the end times. They believed that the end was near, that the tribulation was coming, and that the Messiah would return soon, that the church needed to be purified. Again, this idea that there were two stages for the coming of Messiah, it did not exist in the church before this movement, before this 15-year-old's vision. Charismatic gifts. They believed that the gifts of Acts 2 were being restored as if they've been taken away. How did the Rapture movement spread if it was central to Scotland in the 1830s? Well, first, the Irvingites spread the idea from 1830 to 1833. They believed the Spirit was restoring lost truths. And then enters John Nelson Darby, a famous preacher of the 1800s, And he basically systemized it. He turned it into a system from 1833 to 1870. Darby introduced the idea of a pre-tribulation rapture, a removal event as a result. From there, in 1909, get this, the Scofield Bible spread the idea worldwide by adding rapture notes into the Bible margins. And this made the doctrine mainstream in American evangelism. And we had the beginnings of a new doctrine by men called dispensationalism. You guys know when I started teaching out, I would start by saying, who and in what have you believed? In 1970, Hal Lindsey popularized the theory of a pre-tribulation in his book, The Late Great Planet Earth. It served as the prophecy manual for some of the greatest end-time prophets up until this day. Many famous end-time preachers made and profited from dispensationalism. And then the most famous of all was in 2000, Tim LaHaye and Jerry Jenkins wrote their famous book series, Left Behind. Not only did this doctrine become so popular among Christian ministries, they started making movies about it and turned it into a global phenomenon and belief. Out of this came the greatest money-making scheme in Christianity ever invented, and the ideas are centralized around dispensationalism. I guess it's not sensational enough that Yeshua is going to return in a grand event. To wrap it all up, we have to talk about and sell movies about the rapture. Setting that aside, the so-called spiritual Irvingite movement eventually organized into the Catholic Apostolic Church, but they built their own non-scriptural, elaborate liturgies and rituals. They actually believed that they appointed 12 replacement apostles, all because they expected the imminent return of Christ. And yes, when the last apostle of this movement died in 1901, they firmly believed the apostolic age had ended again. Again. Here is the cold, hard truth. This idea had never existed in church history, period. Darby adopted it, Scofield spread it, and it spread like wildfire. And this man-made doctrine became the modern pre-tribulation rapture doctrine that every Christian believes and follows today. Most believers, even Hebrew believers, even well-meaning believers like Alan Horvath, could not let it go. Now, even as a Christian, this rapture teaching never sat right with me. I always saw it as an escapism mentality. Like the church was never strong because of it. I could never reconcile the few scriptures on it with the whole of Scripture. I also don't like that in all of the original covenant scriptures, it's not mentioned once. And nor is it mentioned in the book of Enoch. Oh, I know people have tried to twist him being caught up and he represents this and that. Moses represents this and that. Guys, come on. Here's what I mean by this. Acts chapter 1, verse 9 and 12. You want a first-hand account of Yeshua's return? Let's go talk to the Malachim that were there when he left. Acts chapter 1, verse 9, when he had said these things as they were looking, he was taken up. and the cloud received him out of their sight. He was taken up, and a cloud received him out of their sight. They don't use the word harpazo here. It's epiro. Lifted up, exalted, self, take one up, hoisted up, lift up, raise on high. To be lifted up with pride, to exalt oneself, to raise up, literally or figuratively. Doesn't that sound like the same definition of the word that we read earlier? To be caught up? Do you see disappear? Do you see magically transform? I don't. When he said all these things as they were looking, he was taken up. That's Yeshua. He was taken up. And a cloud received him out of their sight. So he didn't just disappear. It says that he was taken up into the sky and then went behind the cloud. Or the clouds engulfed him. Either way, he was received out of their sight. Just like the scripture says. And while they were looking steadfastly into the sky because they could see him leave and go up into the sky, he didn't just disappear and translate. He went, and behold, two men stood by them in white clothing. They also said, "You men of Galilee, why do you stand looking into the sky? This Yeshua who was received up from you into the sky will come back in the same way as you saw him going into the sky." Then they returned to Jerusalem from the mountain called Olivet, which is near Jerusalem, a Sabbath's day journey away. We began the study with 1 Thessalonians chapter 5, 1 and 2, but concerning the times and the seasons, brother, you have no need that anything be written to you, for you yourselves know well that the day of Yahweh comes like a thief in the night. And then I had you guys ask yourself some questions. What are the times and seasons? What is the day of Yahweh? Clearly, it's not the rapture, because that's a made-up event by a 15-year-old that had a vision. Why does Shaul teach the day of Yahweh comes as a thief in the night, when all the remaining verses speak of us being of the light or of the day? And what did Shaul say about the timing concerning the times and the seasons? Well, let's examine this a little bit closer. Let's see if we can understand and restore the truth of Yahweh's word. 1 Thessalonians 4, 16 and 17. Let me reread to you the way I didn't read it to you the first time. For Yahweh himself will descend from the heavens with a shout, with the voice of the chief Malak. Not angel, Malak. And with Elohim's shofar. The dead in Messiah will rise first. Then we who are what? Alive. Okay, is that figuratively like alive? Like I'm alive, like I'm breathing? But then he says, we who are left. So those alive and those left are going to be caught up together with them. Why does the scripture say them? I thought we were talking about Yahweh and his angel. Together with them in the clouds to meet Yeshua in the air, so we will be with Yahweh forever. Well, let's decode this a little bit. We've showed in teachings past, despite the Catholic Church's narrative to push Michael as the chief archangel, that Yeshua is the chief Malak of Yahweh's army. He is Shar Saba Bo. He is the ruler, the chief ruler of the armies of Yahweh. Shar Saba Bo Yahweh. This is very clear as he personally leads the wars of Yahweh when fighting for Yehoshua, Joshua. And no, that's not the son's name. Yeshua is his name. Matthew, Yehoshua means house of Hoshe, or Yahweh of Hoshe. It doesn't mean Yeshua. It doesn't mean Yahweh's salvation or Yahweh's deliverance. Matthew 13:41, the Son of Man will send out his Malachim, messengers. That is Yeshua, not Michael. The Son of Man, not Michael the archangel. Right? We're using Matthew chapter 13 to interpret 1 Thessalonians 4:16 and 17. Who's the chief malach? The Son of Man, that's Yeshua, will send out his malachim, not Michael. They will gather out of whose kingdom? Yeshua's kingdom. All things that cause stumbling and those who do iniquity. Why is it Yeshua's kingdom? Because Yahweh has made him ruler of Yahweh's kingdom, and will cast them into the furnace of fire. There will be weeping and gnashing of teeth. I'll say that again. The Son of Man will send out his malachim, his messengers, and they will gather the elect. But why doesn't Matthew 13:41 say the Christians? Do you see the dilemma? You can have a vision. John had a vision. Ezekiel had a vision. Jeremiah had a vision. Both Ezekiel and Jeremiah had visions that influenced John's vision in the Isle of Patmos in the book of Revelation, but that was all scriptural. If you have a vision that goes against the scripture, it's not a vision from the Father. How do you explain Matthew 13:41 that the Son of Man will send out his messengers? They will gather out of his kingdom all things that cause stumbling. It doesn't say they will gather out of his kingdom all the Christians. No, all things that cause stumbling and those who do iniquity, and will cast them into the furnace of fire. There will be weeping and gnashing of teeth. Won't the Christians be surprised when all the evil disappears from the planet and not them? Guys, are we gonna follow the scripture? Are we gonna make up our own doctrines and teach our own stuff? 1 Corinthians 15:51 and 52, behold, I tell you a mystery. And let me teach you something. When Paul says, I tell you a mystery, they're not teaching something new. When Paul says, I tell you a mystery, he's saying, let me teach you something that's been revealed to me by Yahweh and his Ruach through my time with Yeshua about his original covenant, the Torah. He says, we will not all sleep. We will all be changed in a moment, in the twinkling of an eye, at the last trumpet. For the trumpet will sound, and the dead will be raised incorruptible, and we will be changed. How can the rapture be the same event as this event? Isn't it more plausible that just like we read, the Malachim, the messengers that watched the disciples and Yeshua go into the clouds, said that in the same manner that he leaves, he will return. You saw him leave, you're going to see him return. We will not all sleep, but we will all be changed in a moment when he returns and he calls us up. We will be in his presence. We will have to be transformed in some way to stand in his presence. We are sinful, washed in the blood of Yeshua 100%, in our belief in trying to follow his Torah. But sin cannot be in his presence. Adam was made in the image of the Father, Yeshua. We were made in the image of Adam, a sinful, fallen man. We have to be transformed to be in his presence, caught up and transformed to be with him at his return, not at a rapture event. The shofar, the last trumpet, the dead raised incorruptible, all connected together at the same event. The dead aren't raised incorruptible in the rapture event. That only happens at the return of Yeshua HaMashiach, called the second resurrection. So when is the last trumpet? It's the same time the dead are raised incorruptible. The dead in Messiah, those marked by Yahweh for resurrection, will rise first. They have gone to sleep temporarily to awaken at the second coming of Yeshua. Can we even call it the second coming anymore? At his return, then we who are alive and remain will not be raptured. No, the scripture says, in the same way you saw Yeshua leave from Mount Olivet into the sky with your eyeballs, Yeshua will return for all to see, including the believers marked to be caught up, rise with him in that moment. Now, I started this teaching by saying, if you didn't listen to the last teaching, go do that, because Passover is the only night, watch. It's the only time in season, the Moed, where we are to keep a watch that night. The mystery is not the rapture. The mystery is the Moed of Yahweh being revealed to us in their true meaning. The mystery that the very Hebrew Shaul knew about and understood was that Passover and the Moed of Yahweh that can fall on literally any day each year because of the new moon cycle was the event we should all be looking for. And you had to look for it. We will have to look for it. Because instead of that night eating the Passover meal in celebration and going to sleep, because it's generally late by the time Passover meal is complete, and you are to be in a watch mode. The mystery was the connection to Yahweh's Moed, prophetic appointment with mankind. That if you did not prepare for, if you did not look for the new moon, if you did not determine whether the barley in Israel was ripe, you would literally miss out on the biggest night in our entire belief system. And this is what gets me fired up. Because if you go back to this teaching, this belief, this divine revelation teaching that has just permeated the church and just absolutely watered everything down. What did they say? Only the true believers go in the rapture. Well, who are the true believers? The ones that go to church 12 times a week? Or is it the ones that actually studied the Father's word, had it revealed to them by the Father, put it in their hearts, and then practiced it in their life? You think about it. Yeshua and his disciples were not teaching on a rapture event because they knew the truth. It's a Catholic-derived dispensationalism that has led many, many astray. And here's just some very direct conflicts that I found in the scripture that we're going to start to study out. And like a magician performing sleight of hand, your eye is trained on what they want you to see, not what is actually happening behind the scenes. So look at these comparisons, because I'm comparing the words of Scripture and Yeshua himself to this dispensational belief. Yeshua said that after the tribulation that the Son of Man would come. But dispensationalism teaches that before the tribulation, the church is raptured. We're going to study these verses. Yeshua said that there's one return. Dispensationalism teaches that there's two returns, the rapture plus his second coming. Yeshua said that the elect are gathered after tribulation. The church is teaching, might as well say it now, the church is teaching that you're removed before the tribulation. The church is removed before the tribulation. Yeshua said that teaching applies to the disciples. The church teaches that the teaching only applies to Israel. Think about how messed up that is. The one organization, a group of people that shouldn't be Semitic in their belief, anti-Semitic in their belief, is being anti-Semitic in their belief because of the separation of the church in Israel. Yeshua said, I will raise him up at the last day. The church teaches that the church will be raised before the last day. Yeshua said that there would be one resurrection of life and then judgment. The church is teaching that multiple resurrections are separated by 1,000 years. Yeshua said that there's one judgment at the end. The church is teaching that there's 3 or more judgments. Yeshua taught that the sheep and the goats were individuals. The church is teaching that the sheep and goats are nations. We looked at this one. Yeshua said that the wicked would be removed first, not Christians. And the church is teaching that the righteous will be removed first through the rapture. Yeshua said that you'd be hated and you would be delivered up. But the church teaches that we won't even be here to suffer that tribulation. Yeshua said that he who endures to the end would be saved. The church teaches that endurance is for Israel, not the church. Oh, the wrath of Elohim is only going to be poured out on Israel. What if we are Israel? Not even that. What if according to Paul's words, if you believe the scripture, that in your heart you are Israel? Doesn't that apply to you? Yeshua said that the wicked are taken first. Sorry, we already covered that one. Yeshua said that the parables apply to the disciples, but the church has made it so that the parables apply to Israel only on the end times. Yeshua said that Jerusalem's fall would be tied to the end time warnings. The church is teaching that Jerusalem's fall is unrelated to end times. They're not even looking for it. They're going about their daily lives waiting for the rapture. What will be, que sera, sera. The rapture's coming. I really don't care. I'm going to go to church on Sunday and worship my God and hang out with my friends, and the world can go to hell. Yeshua's taught that the Jerusalem's fall was tied to the end time warnings. the church is teaching that Jerusalem's fall is unrelated to end times. Yeshua said that one people of Elohim, and gave that warning to one people of Elohim. Yet the church is teaching that there are two separate groups, Israel versus the church. This doctrine is so entrenched by now, by default, we say the second coming, meaning the rapture and the return of Christ for judgment at the end. We can't begin to unpack the end times if the Father does not set the record straight and show the clear plumb line of his word as our barometer of truth. All these teachings have been done is serve to weaken the belief, our belief, in every way, creating confusion and fear, when the wicked should be the ones afraid of what is coming for them. Yeshua and his disciples were not teaching on a rapture event because they knew the truth. And it's the truth of these scriptures that we're going to study in depth moving forward. Yeshua taught clearly that there were major end time events. And we've showed how they're all connected to Revelation, Enoch, other events, and other letters in the renewed covenant. Yeshua said that the resurrection and the last day, and he taught on it. He taught on judgment. He taught on the return of the Son of Man. He taught on the deception warnings, the true deception warnings. He taught on the tribulation. He taught on the parables of the end. And he very clearly taught on the prophecies regarding Jerusalem. Those are the lock and key to understanding the end time. If we don't understand these passages, we cannot understand if this is the end or not. Because dispensationalism, whether you understand it, know what it is, believe it, have studied it, or have taught it, it doesn't matter. It is so entrenched in the church. All of your beliefs are centered around it, whether you realize it or not. And what I mean by this is I've given you all the evidence that the rapture is not real. It was a vision given to a 15-year-old girl in one of the most controversial movements in Christianity that formed the Apostolic Catholic Church, which in your brain should be enough to say, I don't want anything to do with this. But if that's not enough, and oftentimes that's not enough, so what we do as Christians, right, we hedge our bets. I love Alan Horvath, but Alan Horvath couldn't let it go. It wasn't just the rapture, it became the Net Hetef, and then he started teaching on another teaching. That's what we do. If we can't let something go, we try to find a way to prove it out. And then it becomes our understanding. If it's not in the scripture, we have to let it go. We have to completely sever our understanding of it so that we can see the truth. We are not sons of the night. We are sons of the day, of the light. The Father wants to shine the light on his truth for us. But we have to let the junk go in order for the new growth to come up. Again, I hope this has been a better half for you guys. I'm sure you'll have lots of questions and even some debate. Let's have it. Let's have the debate. Let's have the questions. Let's do it. Because until we start talking about this, we're not going to get this trash out of our belief system.